Fantastic. Here we are. Welcome everyone to another episode of HR Leaders Live, the show where we discuss the future of work with today's most innovative and successful people leaders. So today's show, we're going to be talking about how to drive diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And to help me answer this question, I'm joined by three amazing guests. We have James Cheng, Director of Global Inclusion and Diversity at Gilead. Asif Sadiq, who's the Head of Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging at the Telegraph. And Natasha Miller-Williams, who's the Senior Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at Nielsen. Welcome to the show, guys. How are you all?
The environment.
Great. We made it happen, guys. We got here. It wasn't the easiest, guys. For all of you guys listening, it isn't easy to go live on LinkedIn. So we made it happen. Thank you all for joining me. Before we jump in, guys, when I first reached out to you with the question, how do you drive diversity and inclusion in your workplace? What was the first thing that came to mind? I'll start with you, James. I always like picking on you.
I would always say it is more than one thing. So there's always a combination of efforts that has to go across the organization. So it's not just one area that focuses on diversity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yourself, Natasha?
Yeah, same. The analogy that I always give is that, this is not like a little sailboat. It's like trying to turn a cruise ship. And whenever an organization will start a diversity and inclusion initiative, you can envision really trying to turn a cruise ship and the amount of energy that would be required to do so. And similarly to what James just said, it requires multiple stakeholders, multiple initiatives, multiple programmatic efforts, and systemic change.
I think it's, it's so interesting the changes in this space, and I think it's now reached a point where the whole organization is needed to back this. It's not just, I was speaking to recently about that D&I is no longer just a HR, policy, or it just doesn't sit in HR anymore. It affects every part of any business, and unless you embed it across the business, in every single piece, and see it as a business imperative, not a nice to do, and I think that's the real sort of.
And when I first posted this out, like you guys are saying, I had so many questions that were thrown back at us and across so many different areas. So as you mentioned, it's not just one thing, right? And so I think it would be great to start off with some of those questions that are common questions that keep being asked. So one of the things that came through quite a lot from I think probably 10 plus times was, how do you find the balance between quality of hire and diversity? And a lot of people kept bringing that up more, meaning how do you make sure the candidate fits the job, the company culture, but it's also diverse in the sense of not the usual type of person that's hired in that role. So I think, it'd be great if you guys could share your perspective on that.
I would say that, a lot of organizations have a criteria in mind of what quality of hire means and what that looks like. And I think one of the first steps is to even challenge the definition of quality of hire, because sometimes the quality of hire, it could be superficial things like where a candidate has graduated from, or past organizations where they have worked, or other elements that aren't really rooted in the individual's ability to do the job well. So some of it goes back to just expanding the definition of what are the real core competencies or the requirements to really be successful in the role. So I think that's one of the first, steps for an organization. And when we talk about culture fit, in our organization, we really challenge the words culture fit, because culture fit has become the embodiment of unconscious bias, and it can really stand in the way of any organization that has diversity and a lens to diversity and inclusion, because it's a phrase that can be used to reject people rather than thinking more openly about culture add and how someone who might be different in really powerful ways can enhance the culture of the organization through their differences. And so at Nielsen, we really challenge, what's the definition of quality of hire? We never compromise on making the best hire in every instance, and really pushing ourselves to think about culture add rather than culture fit.
Fantastic. What about yourself, James?
Thank you, Natasha. That was amazing, of course. I would say for us, it's the same for Gilead Sciences. We're very much focused on the culture ad. Now, when it comes to culture ad, it's always about from a tactical perspective as well as from a cultural perspective. There's a bit of the intent behind the hire. So as we talk about having standardization, when you're talking about top talent at all times, it's also about educating and bringing the leaders, the hiring leaders along the journey. Because one of the biggest concerns we've learned is that not all managers lead the same, obviously, but in the same time, what their perspective of quality needs to be defined with them, not for them, but with them. So a lot of it is very much about teaching them and helping them understand where and meeting them where they're at. Because a lot of times, most people don't realize that when you tell a leader, these are the criteria when it comes to being competent, but what is potentially causing them to still select other is what you're going to have to dig into. And that takes more time than just saying, these are the minimum requirements, these are the preferred requirements, and then actually having that conversation long term. And then, of course, with that, how are you specifically partnering with your talent acquisition team differently? So are you bringing them into the conversation in the beginning? Are you partnering with them as true partners versus transactional? Are you planning what you're asking for? And is the interpretation done correctly? Because again, you also have a difference of people. So from your recruiters to your sourcers to your hiring managers and then their leaders, there's always a potential of bias built into each one of those sections. So making sure there's alignment, debriefs, actual full-on actions that could be tied to performance. That means, again, making sure everyone understands what they consider is top talent.
Thank you so much, James and Natasha, for that question. One of the other questions as well we got was, in terms of the pressure on recruitment in this area, a lot of the members are talking about, are there any tactical strategies that you guys put in place or have seen that help in hiring diverse candidates? Because a lot of the recruiters feel under a lot of pressure to bring in the best talent, but then may not necessarily have the right sort of tactical strategies in place to make sure that they're finding a balance of both sides.
So I'll jump in on this one. As I was brought over from Cargill to Gilead, one of the first things I've realized is that when building a team to help establish a good and consistent diversity hiring practice requires standardization in certain levels, fundamentals in research, fundamentals in practice, making sure there's a bit of safety for our recruiters and sourcers so they can only search for what is top talent. And I take a bit of the blind hiring practice a little bit in implementing ways for our recruiters to at least fall back and saying, hey, we're gonna look for from a larger pool versus I'm just going to target this subcategory. And that has been one of the biggest focus for my organizations, making sure we're broadening pools as big as we can, partnering with as many organizations as we're able to, and utilizing tools and technologies that are out there that can help us identify these tools and resources.
The first question that I like to ask any group, any business leader or any organization is, what do you not have? Because that answer can differ greatly. In some cases, it might be gender. In some cases, it might be a specific racial, ethnic group, or it might be something else. And so I think the first question is just like, what is the representation that we're trying to grow or to build to have a truly diverse and inclusive culture in the organization or within the specific team? And then with that in mind, there are some very intentional ways to target those groups. And so it might be a very specific university recruitment strategy. Like, for example, if you are looking to build in Black students, you can target HBCUs, just as an example. Or if you're looking for middle career, you can partner with organizations that may have the representation for the group that you need to build in your organization. So I think just being really smart and strategic to build partnerships in areas where you need to build representation in your organization is a really smart intentional way. And some of this takes time. Just with any partnership, it might not happen overnight. Going back to my cruise ship analogy, you'll need to make an investment and leverage the people in your organization to build relationships with some of these organizations or some of these universities to build relationships. And over time, you'll start to see some change.
The other question that keep coming up, guys, is, and something I hear a lot of, is how do you create a more inclusive culture? And I know it's, again, quite a broad question, but it's something that more and more, now, what does that actually mean to you guys? And how are you going about building that within your own organizations?
So for me, one of the things that our organization has been actively doing is trying to identify what the employee voice is, because your culture is your people. So understanding what they believe is their organization and how they are valued. So if your employee value proposition in the organization is vital in establishing what your culture is. And then from there, if there is things that needs to be tweaked, at least you know where the challenges are. So you know where to target, where you're going to be able to make influence. And reality, as Natasha has mentioned, it is a big ship to steer. So understanding that it is not a quick change, but it is a valuable change, and how much it directly impacts every single employee, pre, present, and post. Because remember, you also have allies who are alums of the organization. You have people who are potentials of the organization, and thinking it as a culture as a whole in that sense.
When we think about shaping culture at Nielsen, we think about the relationship between managers and their teams, because managers play a huge role in employee engagement. And when you think about just like who can really shape culture, who can drive change, a lot of this happens like right at the individual team level. And so a big part of what we've been trying to drive at Nielsen is the conversations that are happening like one-on-one and right at a team level, and encouraging managers and their teams, or teams all together, to just have more courageous, daring conversations to break the biases that get in the way of how decisions are made, to break the biases that get in the way of giving really open, constructive feedback so that people can learn and grow, and just encouraging people to have more straight talk so that we have created an environment where people can just show up as their most authentic selves at work. And also tied to culture is just the space of accountability, which we haven't really talked about a lot on this call, but people really need to be held accountable for shaping culture, especially people, managers. When you take on the important responsibility of being a leader in an organization, that comes with some responsibility. And so we're really encouraging our senior leaders and our people managers to be accountable for shaping the culture of their teams, and making sure that that's tied all the way through all of our performance processes and how we evaluate our managers in the organization as well.
Absolutely love that, by the way. And that's all of your peers I've been speaking to. That's one of the core things they keep telling me all the time, that it makes to make sure that it takes a strong leadership team and unwavering accountability to, and it has to start at the very top. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. Right. So what about yourself, Asif?
So yeah, I mean, I 100% agree, with that. Just to add, I think one of the things we need to be really mindful of, especially when it comes to culture around diversity, is that it's not one group's responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility. And I always find that when it comes to diversity, or organizations always try to find those individuals who might have or possess that diverse characteristic to start the conversation. Well, actually, we need to create a safe space where everyone embeds that culture. Everyone talks about, different elements of diversity. And that's really, really crucial, because one of the things which I am finding, or I have seen recently, is diversity is a conversation that, the same groups are having amongst themselves. And we really need to broaden it, because, to make anything a success and to really make that change happen, we need the majority, if I can use the term majority, within an organization to be having the same conversations. That's when we'll start seeing the change in all the different levels.
How have you gone about doing that in your own organizations then, Asif?
So for me, it's been really, at the Telegraph, I really try to focus on belonging and trying to bring in what I call the individuals who now feel diversity has got nothing to do with them, bring them back into the conversation. through really broadening their understanding that actually diversity has got something to do with everyone. Everyone's got something they bring to the table. Everyone has something that they can, talk about, and really understanding that when we talk about belonging, it's about everyone. We want everyone to have a sense of belonging, to be their true, authentic self, to feel they can contribute to the conversation. And I've found that's really helped, because it's unfortunately the negativity surrounding the D&I conversation is not there when you talk about belonging.
I agree with everything you're saying. I'm sure everyone listening does. How do you then create policies and put policies in place that then support this? If we talk about, for example, parental leave or for same-sex couples, or medical cover for transition-related procedures, etc. How do you then go about putting, because we're living in a world where society is moving so fast and most companies are struggling to keep up as well.
Just to add, sorry, I just need to add on the policy piece. I mean, I think policies are great, but I think it's the work that's done behind the policies that's important. So just to give you an example, we introduced 6 months equal parental pay for both men and women. Now, that's a great statement, great thing, but unless we change the culture and more men start taking 6 months parental leave, it will never have a positive impact on anyone. So I think a lot of these policies that we introduce, whether it's flexible working, flexible working is great, but there is still a perception that flexible working is for working parents. So how do we create this workplace, or this, I don't necessarily think it's in the policy, because the policies are clearly, they state that it's for everyone. It's the culture behind the policies. What happens when I, as a man, go and ask my manager, who's a man, that I'm thinking of taking 6 months off, parental leave? What response is he going to give me? How does he, address that conversation? Or when someone comes in and says they want to work flexibly because they're running the marathon, so they want to start work late. How do we create a culture where it doesn't matter why you're working flexible, but the fact that you want to, it's okay. So I think there's this whole piece in the background around creating almost the support mechanisms to allow for these new and innovative policies to really be there for everyone, not just for particular groups. What do
you think, James?
So for me, it's been an interesting journey when it comes to identifying the needs of the people again. Because I always tell people that you don't want to boil the ocean, and you always start from what the employees want and need. So I've heard this interesting story recently about how an organization who wanted to bring in more diverse population in gender. And first thing they said, oh, let's build a facility for daycare. But they failed to ever ask the employees that were there, what did they want? And it was actually the exact reverse. It was less about daycare initially, more about flexibility in their where they can work. And that was a money spent that could have done a different focus initially. And that made an impact that was not as valuable to the organization. Now, of course, it was based on their demographic, it was based on the overall population, but that changed the perception for the leadership. And that's the same thing I've been trying to lead with, is, again, not trying to boil the ocean, but make sure that what you're doing aligns with what your people need. The other part is, and this is something that I've implemented even within my own team, which is your priority is your life, and your life starts with you and your family. And if I, as a leader, can't say that publicly, then I cannot expect anyone to follow that lead. So as a leader, my responsibility is to make sure my peers and those above me as well as below me understand day to day, your number one priority is you and your family first, and work quality over quantity. And that has not changed. And that is still the foundation of giving people the respect, because as you build more policy, you're building more confines for people. So understand that adding more does not make it better.
What I'll add to that is I want to talk a little bit about just systemic change. And one of my big learnings from being in the D&I space for a while is just the difference between programmatic efforts and really driving systemic change. Because ultimately, all of us are at work to grow, to have thriving careers where we move, where we learn. And all of that comes down to decisions that often someone else is making on our behalf. Whether it's our boss or some other leader in the organization. And so one of our big learnings has been to make sure that we really make sure that we are creating processes that are fair and inclusive, from how hiring decisions are made to who moves in the organization, to who's considered for promotions, et cetera. And that's been really important to make sure that diverse candidates are considered throughout each of those stages of the employee experience. And it requires thinking about these things differently. For example, when you're thinking about hiring decisions, hiring from a diverse slate is a really important consideration, because you're not going to bring more diversity into the door if you're not interviewing and considering diverse individuals, or making sure that you have a diverse panel of interviewers to interview that diverse slate. Because one individual and their biases, which we all have, may never bring in the diversity that you need as an organization, as compared to even the diversity on this panel, and the way that a decision may shift if we're all bringing our collective thought into a hiring decision for an open role. And so those are some of the shifts that we're making as an organization, which ultimately impact culture and how people view opportunity in the organization.
And do you mind if I jump in a little bit on that to back that up? One of the things that, as we're thinking about overall and the way we've been doing it, I would say always remember to draw out the whole journey for a candidate. It's not always about the beginning when you're attracting them. It's about also when they come in, what is their experience? And also what is the tenure and development of that experience for that employee? So when we talk about attracting talent, that tends to be the conversation for diversity. But when you bring someone in, they don't see culture, they don't see what they need, they're going to leave anyways. So being conscious that when you look at a candidate, you look at the whole life cycle for that potential employee from end to end. And with that, you also need to be able to speak to it, deliver that on a consistent basis, and also be honest and authentic. Because let's say right now you don't have a diverse team or panel right now. Be upfront and say, hey, right now we don't have this, but I'm honest to you now that we are looking and working on ways to solve this problem. We would love your input so you can help influence us in that change, if that is the case. And welcoming them to be part of the voice, part of a seat at the table to make that change. Because again, a lot of organizations don't have that diverse panel yet, surprisingly enough. Because the last thing you want to do is pick token people to do all your interviews.
And we're seeing that, aren't we? We're seeing that a lot. Yeah.
And that's one of the things. Again, being upfront, being honest, giving them the full view that, hey, you know what? I might not have this right now, but we have a plan to develop you as soon as you get in. And I want to make sure your journey is valuable as much as you as a contribution to the organization.
Chris, just to add to that, one of the biggest dangers of having the token person on a panel, or there when you're trying to recruit someone, is unfortunately the danger of that I went through all this to get where I am, and they're trying to see that. So it doesn't help. I've been on panels, I've been for interviews many years ago where, they'll present someone who looks like me, and the perception is it's going to make life easier, but it actually makes life worse, because the person's trying to really make sure that I struggle throughout the process because they have to. And I think that's really, really important, because this is where when we identify people based on their external characteristics, it is difficult because society is so wide, and there's so many different people. In the UK, we use a phrase, and Chris, this, BAME or BME, Black Minority Ethnic, and it absolutely irritates me, because it's a very large group of people we're grouping together and then assuming their needs are the same, their training is the same, their characteristics are the same. So my only thing is that it's important for panels themselves to very much to what James was saying, to be educated, to learn, to understand, but the token person is not necessary. I'd rather see someone who even doesn't look like me but understands what this means to me and how my career should progress within the organization than someone who just represents the same external characteristics.
Yeah, I think the point I was making, just to clarify, is that the panel itself needs to be diverse. And
oh, definitely.
organization should determine the definition of that diversity based on the diversity that you have in the organization and based on the diversity that you're looking to bring into the organization, and make really smart, wise choices in how you assemble that composition.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic, guys. Great points. And James, I love your point about if being open and honest, that if you don't have that, then say it. Don't try and force the issue, and be open and honest about that as well, which is fantastic. One of the areas that a lot of people have commented around is, what's your most memorable moments in your careers as a D&I leader? What project or sort of transformation or that you've led that really stands out to you guys personally, that meant the most, that's memorable, and that you could share some insights on that you've led within your organizations?
And I don't know if I mentioned this, Chris, when we last spoke, but when I was at EY leading our sponsorship program, and I feel really, really strongly about sponsorship. I mean, mentoring is really good, but you know, one of the things diverse staff members, especially at middle management, need is sponsorship. You know, someone vouching for them, someone ensuring doors are being opened, someone ensuring that they're getting the right jobs. You know, something which naturally comes to the majority. You know, and that's not me saying it. There's numerous pieces of research out there that identifies that. So I ran that program, and it was quite successful. And I think that for me is really one of the things, if I can, you know, which I always feel really proud about, because it's actual difference. And you know, in this D&I space, you know, and my colleagues can probably, you know, vouch for this as well. You know, you do so much, and when you see the results, when you see the difference actually, you know, being visible, that's what makes it different. Not the 2% increase on the D&I data. You know, that doesn't mean anything. But when you see someone progressing, someone getting promoted, someone telling you they're getting that you know, that experience that they want, that's the meaningful piece that we look for.
My answer is actually really similar. Several years ago, I worked on a leadership development program for rising diverse top talent, and just seeing people move into new roles after being in that experience, and their retention in the organization, and just seeing new meaning in their work and the connections and the relationships that they built was very rewarding for me, and created just a sense of purpose for me in the work that I was doing day by day.
I would say for me, it's agreed with all of you. On top of that was the biggest lesson of failing fast in D&I space, because we fail quite often in the space, being that it is not solved. And I always lead back to that there is no silver bullet. And in the start of my career, I would say the biggest aha and failing fast was the expectation that I as a minority individual can speak to a bit when I can only speak for myself. And that's the reality that I had to learn quick, and I failed quickly on that. And I'm proud to say that that's a lesson I always to pay it forward to others, to say, hey, you have to be able to fail fast, especially in the space of D&I. Because again, if you get hits in this space a lot. So I would say my peers would definitely say that is common space.
Well, thanks for sharing, guys. That really, really means a lot. And James, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's not easy, right? I think something that people don't talk about enough. And when we've spoken many times, and you know, no one talks about the failures as much. Everyone loves to talk about success, but there's many failures that come before that, many stressful days, you know, sleepless nights that happened. And it's important that people understand that that's the reality. Sometimes the perception can be, because everyone shares all the great things that's happening and all the success stories, but not all of the things behind it as well. So one of the other questions that everyone asks is, many of the people listening are very early on their journey, you know, just sort of beginning their D&I inclusion programs in their companies, and they're asking, you know, what are the top 3 things that they should focus on just as they're just starting out from scratch? What would your advice be, guys, if you're just starting out a D&I program in your organization? What are the top 3 areas to focus on?
I can give number one, and I wonder if you all will agree with it, but it's leadership alignment. Like the successful initiatives that we've launched all require just leadership alignment. And it's not only leadership alignment, not everything is successful because it was top down, but having that leadership alignment at the start is very important. So that's one that I will submit to the table.
I'll add another one, which is, you know, with anything, it has to be organization wide. And what I mean by that, you know, especially when we're looking at particular inclusion programs, which are targeted at specific groups, I get that, and you know, and I get the need for them. However, you must openly communicate. You know, the worst thing ever is these secret groups, you know, where there's a perception
Yeah.
amongst groups that, you know, people go off on this special training which gives them superpowers to come back and, you know, succeed, and it's not true, right? And then people just don't understand, and you know, the moment you're not transparent, people then make assumptions. They assume they're missing out on something. And I was actually just saying at an event the other day that, you know, this notion that D&I is, you know, it's a Robin Hood sort of story is not true. You know, it's not taking away from one group and giving to another. And we need to make sure people understand that you know, D&I is about everyone. So that's my one big thing with any program. Make sure you communicate it widely, loudly, and with everyone.
For me, it would definitely align with all those, plus the area of mission, vision, and purpose. You have to have clarity in that to be the direction for everyone. And not having that for the organization, not just for leadership, but even to the individuals that are making the impact in the organization. Just remember, it has to be clear, has to be consistent, and again, has to have a tie back to the organization and the business.
Fantastic. Amazing, guys. So I'm sorry I wasn't writing those down furiously on the notepads. I forgot how to go and do that. What about one of the things that I'm fascinated about, and we spoke about this before, James, in the past, about the link between innovation and diversity. And I absolutely and I've heard some incredible stories in my career about how bringing together those diverse groups and minds have led to the most amazing products and innovations. Could you share your story that you shared to me before at Cargill? If you recall which one I'm referring to.
I can remember a few, both Best Buy and Cargill.
It might be the Best Buy one, actually. It might be the Best Buy one I'm thinking of.
So the Best Buy one, there's a few too. But okay, I'll take it two ways. So for Best Buy, we had an opportunity where we were identifying ways to cut costs as an organization. And one of the things that the organization was reevaluating was our marketing and branding initiatives, and specifically when it came to materials and resources in the organization. And one of the things that they were reviewing was content that was being published and printed. And our organization was evaluating all the duplications of language. So one of the things that our organization decided was to reach out with our Latin Hispanic population and partner with that specific EBN at the time, Employee Business Network, to see, hey, is there ways that we can improve our market value and otherwise? And one of the first things they said was, get rid of all the signages and duplication in language. Just hire Hispanic and Latin speaking employees that represents the community instead of wasting millions of dollars on print. And that actually made an impact in the organization, both from a savings, but also creating value for our clients. So that was something that was a easy win that, again, all we had to do was ask the employees because they had the answer.
That's what I love about that. And what was the other example of the Cargill one?
So Cargill was one of the big things was establishing and within the employee, so we call it business resource groups at Cargill, which is giving them a seat at the table how to bring innovation from a different lens to each of the groups. So as we have different business resource groups, they are sitting at the table with the business when it comes to innovating and creating strategic ideas and tackling the market. So when partnering with our vendors, let's say for pet food or otherwise, or other components of feed or otherwise in the organization, they were able to give insight within the community's unique buying interests, the way they perceive the organization, how marketing is different with the type of platforms. And that has been some of the initiatives that organization was utilizing, is how to impact the different communities and gain a market buy-in from that space.
Do you guys have any stories, Natasha and Asif, around how sort of diversity has led to innovation in your products and in the organization?
Well, I have a thought. It's not a specific story. I mean, there's study after study has shown that diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams, or diverse teams are more innovative than non-diverse teams. Now, they are not always easier to work on, because there are other stories that show that diverse teams, have more like storming and forming that goes on because you just have more differences in the team. That's the other side of this scale. But when they do come together, they do outperform. They are more innovative. They do have higher business results. And some of the examples are the ones that James shared, where it was product innovation. Some of our clients at Nielsen had like new flavor profiles that were introduced by leveraging the insights or the perspectives of their diverse associates, or it may just be a new form or some other new type of product. But I think the other side of this coin is that leveraging the diverse perspective of your associates can stop an organization from making a mistake. Like if you think about some of the companies that have been in the news or made headlines recently because of a failure that may have been avoided, like if they had leaned into the perspective of the diversity of their own organization, or if they had just had more diversity in their own organization, because those of us that may represent a particular group will think to ourselves, like, if
wait a minute,
in the meeting, I would have said like, that's a really bad idea. That will not go over well in the marketplace. And so that's just the other like side of this, that it's not always about like the innovation itself. It's about saying like, wait, like, pump the brakes here. Like that's not something that we should do or go to market with. And I love the stories of, how we can lean into our employee resource groups for their perspective. And we encourage our organization to do the same. But I think the real goal here is to just have teams that are so diverse. All of that diversity is right there at the table already. And so that's the end goal. We're not there yet. And so we lean into the perspective of the employee resource groups. But I think that there are two sides of the coin here. It's the innovation, and it's like, like, let's not do that either.
Yeah, what were you going to say, Asif? Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to add to that is, one of the things about diverse teams, especially in innovation, it breaks group thinking. So it breaks that down, and it allows, even for the people who are not necessarily from those diverse backgrounds, to think differently. It breaks that culture of one way of thinking. So that's really, really important. So it's not just helping one group, it's helping the whole team to change. 100% about the mistakes in innovation. I can think of numerous examples. I will not name any of the companies.
I know. I was tempted. But
one of the other things is missed opportunities, and I see this as when you don't have that innovation in product design, there's missed opportunities in so many ways, because then everything is pitched, designed for certain groups. And I was only recently I was booking a holiday with my family. And I'd gone on one of these sites which recommend places for you to stay, and it recommends a holiday for you based on your average English person with 2 kids, certain background, and that doesn't work for me, right? So I automatically switch off, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to go there. And you're missing my custom. You're missing the opportunity to generate income from someone different. And it's the same with even some of the big, I was speaking to someone about some of the big car manufacturers. They're having to adapt. The new emerging markets are Africa, South Asia, the Middle East, and those people now in those countries have their own identity. So these car manufacturers are having to adapt to sell to these people, because that's missed opportunities where sales of these vehicles are dropping in some of our countries. There's opportunities there. So it's missed opportunities if you don't have innovation. The product design's not going to, you're not going to have products that meet everyone's needs. And actually, there'll be someone else who'll sell them that product if our companies can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love the point that you made about just speaking up at the table and breaking groupthink. And I think it goes back to the point that we were talking about around culture. Like you have to have the culture where everyone is comfortable doing that, because you can have diversity at the table. Mm-hmm. You haven't simultaneously created the culture where people can be their authentic selves. You could still have a missed opportunity. And so that's where I think like the diversity and the inclusive culture actually come together to make this work.
And I want to make sure I tag on with Natasha's former statement that wraps us wonderfully together, was that it's also the responsibility of the leader to ask and bring that voice back in, as they should be able to be empowered to speak. But if they are not speaking, it's the responsibility and accountability of the leader to ask them to speak. because again, you have to make sure you bring them in.
Yeah, I wasn't always comfortable bringing my most authentic self to work, because early in my career, I was the only Black woman on a team that I worked on for a very long time. And I just wasn't comfortable just representing who I was. And I often reflect on the missed opportunities of just sharing unique parts about my culture, for a very long time. And so, now every opportunity that I have to encourage someone else or to just represent myself in an authentic way is really important.
How did you overcome that, Natasha? Was it just due to your experience and then is that slowly growing that confidence, or was there a particular mentor that helped you, or a particular time where you decided yourself that you're going to do that? Just out of interest.
Everything you just named, just time, experience in the workplace, mentoring, role models, like, as the company became more diverse and beginning to see more people like me that came into the organization, and having those role models. Some of those role models looked like me, to be honest. Some of those role models didn't look like me, but there were things in them that I saw that I wanted to aspire to be like them in other ways, whether it was a female leader, or in some cases, it may not have been a female leader. It may have been a male leader, but there were attributes about this individual that I wanted to model myself after. So just beginning to see myself in other people in other ways, and finding that sense of comfort to just represent my unique ways, and seeing other people step out of their own comfort zone, whatever it was about them that made them unique, and seeing them say, like, I'm just going to show up as who I am. I began to feel more comfortable showing up as my authentic self too.
And did you find that as you began to do that, people in your team began to emulate the same? Because you're kind of, you are leading the way in that sense. You find that people in your team then began to speak up to you as you were doing it to your leadership team?
Yeah, I felt others did the same. And to be honest, I felt like my relationships improved. Like, and like when you are just assimilating, like you actually can't have good relationships as much as you think you might be, because you're trying to be a certain way. Like, relationships can't grow unless you're just your best authentic self.
Yeah, fantastic. Can you relate to that, James?
I would say very much. Actually, whenever I do get a chance to meet our new hires in the organization, first thing I always say, especially the ones who are joining from a very early journey of their career, I always say, we didn't hire you to assimilate to the organization. We hired you for what makes you different. So don't forget that. Don't lose that as you come in. Yes, there's of course customs and process and things that are responsibility of the organization, but ultimately don't lose who you are when you come into the organization. We need those differences. And then to go along with Natasha's statement about the mentors and leaders that helped influence us, one of my leaders that I still talk to on a regular basis is someone that's from farther past. He's a white male from Britain, who is in a completely separate field from where I'm at. He's the chief accounting officer for Best Buy. Again, I purposely asked him to be a mentor and took that bold step because he was everything that I was not. And that was on purpose, because that's different diversity. He had a completely different experience, both career, both path, both individual backgrounds in general. But again, being purposeful and understanding that diversity is value in everything I do, including who I identify as my mentors and otherwise.
Fantastic. Well, before we wrap up, guys, any other areas you feel we haven't touched upon that we should, that's important for everyone listening who are on this journey?
For me, I would definitely say, remember, it is not easy, but again, it's worth it. Because again, we're doing this for not just for ourselves, but for our next generation. It's for the sustainability of people to come. As I usually tell people, I do this for my nephews and nieces who are going to be the next generation that's coming into this world.
Yeah, I would say for organizations who are starting on this journey and just, thinking about what to do, everything that we've already said is relevant, and just having zero tolerance for bad behaviors. That's like been my my big learning around building an inclusive culture. Like once you determine your values, like you just have to really like stick to them and have zero tolerance for anything that is outside of those inclusive values and behaviors, and just embrace that this is ongoing. Nielsen has been on a D&I journey for more than 10 years now, and we're still on this journey. We're still learning, we're still growing, and we're still connecting with professionals like all of you on new ways to do things. And so to just embrace that as a part of the journey.
I guess for me, it's just one of the things I feel more and more strongly about, and I have of recent, which is we need to move away from the measuring diversity to measuring inclusion. Because just having diversity doesn't mean people are happy, doesn't mean they feel included, doesn't mean they're going to stay. So and a lot of people will always ask, well, how do you measure inclusion? Well, that's when you start speaking to your people, not just the characteristics.
Yeah.
Fantastic, guys. Amazing. I know we could have another 2 hours conversation on this topic, but I'm going to end it at some time. Well, look, thank you so much for all of you for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. It's always a pleasure to see your faces, and I really appreciate it. And I'm sure everyone listening does. And I'm sure you're going to get a lot of questions on LinkedIn after this, so you can blame me later. I'm sorry about that. You're going to get from everyone. Apart from that, everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for your questions and joining us today. We really wanted to, the whole point we're going live here on LinkedIn is that we want to bring you into the conversation and bring you on the journey. And that's been the magic of being able to do this. So if you like the show, please hit the like button. Also consider sharing it. We really want to spread all of this knowledge and experience with as many people as possible. Also, please consider following us here on LinkedIn. You'll be notified next time we post and go live. And also leave a comment below. We're already thinking about next week's discussion. What topics would you like us to cover? Who would you like us to get involved? Apart from that, thank you again to all of you for joining us. Natasha, James, Asif, really appreciate it. Everyone listening, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you all at the same time next week. Thanks a lot. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Take care.